Welcome to Kickin with Sensei, and today we're joined by Glenn Murphy of NC Systema. And if you just want to give a little bit of background about yourself, Glenn, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. My name's Glenn Murphy. I'm from southeast of England originally, and moved over to the States about 13 years ago, and started NC Systema there. I've been practicing martial arts since I was about 7 years old. I'm about 45 now, so you can do the math on how long I've been training. Initially in karate and JiuJitsu, and then put a lot of years into Aikido. Did about 14 years of Aikido, including a couple of years in Spain under Saito Sensei, the Iwama dojo there, and then came back from Japan. Lived in London for about 5 years. I was training and teaching Aikido there, and then discovered Systema, Russian martial art, while I was in London, and then eventually made the jump wholesale over to training and teaching Systema, and I've been doing that since 2006. So that's about another 14 years, I guess. So I've got since then, and I founded NC Systema as a training group initially, and now it's grown to a fair size, and we teach workshops and classes in person, and of course this year online mostly. In Systema, in the health aspects, in the combat aspects, and everything in between. So yeah, that's it.
Excellent. And what first got you interested in martial arts when you were younger?
Probably, if I'm honest, a combination between going to an all-boys school and there just being a lot of scraps and wanting to hold my own and not get bullied and help other kids if they were getting bullied, stuff like that, and just loving kung fu movies, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Karate Kid, all that growing up, just heavily influenced by that late 70s, early 80s push of karate and kung fu, and just wanting to be like them, really, if I'm honest. I just thought it looked cool and exotic and fun, and then when I found I had some skills from it, it was a nice side effect to be able to hold my own, and then later I think just probably more on the defense, the practical personal protection side, just really wanting to defend myself and my family, and getting deep into everything that would entail, and kind of having some sort of code to live by, something akin to a knight's code or a samurai code or something like that give you a system of morals and a system of standards to live by. And I like the idea of a package that came with training that allows you to focus yourself and do that. So I think probably a lot of reasons. Yeah, and it's also something that you can do for fitness and fun that you don't get bored of, in my experience. I've never got bored in all my years of training. Yeah,
definitely. And do you think having that philosophical code, so to speak, is important in martial arts?
Do I think it's...
Do you think it's important to have that in a martial art, to have that code to follow?
I think it is. I mean, I know not everybody trains for the code and the moral guidelines and that kind of stuff specifically. People can train for all kinds of reasons, right? Some people might just like to do kickboxing, in a little school and never have a fight. They just want to hit bags so they can get the high intensity interval training on and lose a bit of weight, and that's fine. If it makes them healthier and it makes them happy, then I think that's a good thing. If you're studying it for like a conditioning aspect or something like that, then I think that's fine. Some do it as just a way of relaxing, and that's fine too. But I think if you're even half serious about training martial arts and you think that you want to apply it in a defensive situation, then you need some sort of set of guidelines to go along with the responsibility of having these skills, right? You have to recognize how fragile the human body can be and your potential for damaging it, both your opponents and your own, actually. You realize how easy it is to damage yourself in training or in a fight, and the more experienced you become as a martial artist, the less interested you get in getting into fights, because you're aware of how much damage could be done on both sides, right? Nobody ever really wins, right? You both come away having lost something small, even if it's a little bit of pride or a little bit of, like, I could have dealt with that better. I didn't need to get into a fight. There's usually something that's gone wrong if you're actually in a fight and had to use your martial arts that way. So I think it's important to have some sort of framework, but I think it's important to question what that framework is and what it's teaching you to do. Some martial arts are more militaristic, and they were developed for that, to push people, through boot camp make them into kind of more aggressive fighting machines. Some are more kind of peaceful and introspective, and they ask you to be more reflective and ask questions about yourself and what you want and how you interact with people. And then there's everything in between, right? So I think it's important to have a consistent message and make sure that it's one that fits with your values as a person.
Excellent. Systema's came out of Russia, and what would be the background to Systema and the history of it?
It goes back at least as far as the 14th century. in Slavic martial arts, mostly that were based on swords and horseback and stuff like that, the kind of things that you see Cossacks doing, flinging swords around and rolling about on the ground and stuff like that. But there was kind of a confluence at some point under the kind of former Soviet Union, in which a lot of martial arts were kind of banned, and Systema, or its predecessors in Slavic martial arts, were kind of bunched together and used in order to train the military and to train bodyguards. And it was kind of restricted for that use for quite a long time. So Systema, as we know it today, is really kind of a product of old traditions that go way, way back. A bunch of different fighting methodologies and practices and techniques, including, you know, practical Cossack kind of type fighting, and just kind of esoteric breathing techniques that come from the Orthodox monastic traditions, old Russian monks practicing body conditioning and breathing and fasting and cold water dousing to make themselves more impervious so they could stay awake for 20 hours of prayer and stuff like that, you know. So it's kind of a confluence of those things, along with kind of like a military analysis, and be like, okay, what works, what's practical, and how can we teach this to people? So by about the 1950s, 1960s, it was very biomechanical. The way it was taught, was all about leverage and sequences and how to move things around each other. And it was taught, and it's pretty much restricted to military. And it's only really become a civilian martial art from the 1990s onwards, when the Soviet Union broke up, and a lot of people who were teaching and training Systema in the military no longer had jobs, or in different places, and left. And particularly Vladimir Vasiliev, who's my instructor, left and moved to Canada, and then started teaching it as a civilian martial art. And since then, a lot of people have come out of Russia to teach, you know. But he was probably the first one to bring it out of Russia. So,
yeah.
at the time.
But be more self-defense, combative sort of style of thing, wouldn't it, rather than sports?
Yeah, it's not really sporting at all. I wouldn't say there's no sporting applications, because there are some MMA fighters and even boxers that have trained in Systema, but then they're still using boxing and MMA techniques to spar with and stuff. Yeah. So it's not geared towards competition and sparring, really. It's geared towards one of two poles. It's either geared towards flat out life and death combat and just prevail and survive in any situation, or it's geared towards training in order to make yourself more healthy and more robust and more resilient to injury, impact, emergencies, anything you might have to deal with outside of a combat situation. It might be a car crash or getting out of a burning building, anything that kind of makes you just generally more robust. So one part of Systema is about shoring up those attributes, making you more mobile, more flexible, calmer under pressure, difficult to break, you can take impacts quite easily, that kind of thing. And the other part is about the specific application, like how do you fight one guy, two guys, three guys, fight in the water, fight in confined spaces, all of those things. So it's both the foundation that enables you to fight, and the methodology that teaches you how to fight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, excellent. Now, I have heard of Systema before now, but it was more the fighting side of it. But I was looking through your website and seeing there's a lot of actually a healing side of it too, and a lot of yoga and massage incorporated.
Sure.
How does that match up with the combat side?
Yeah, so it's not really yoga. It probably comes from a similar root. It's about as old, the old stuff that comes in there. But there's a lot of breathing practices. They're a little bit different from the ones they do in yoga. Some kind of look similar, but there's a different emphasis in Systema and breathing, I think. And there's stretching, and there's, you know, slow movement transition postures that look a little bit like yoga or Tai Chi from some angles. But it's basically, if you think of it as a pyramid, if you're looking to attain combat skill or like defensive skill, if you layer everything upon a shaky foundation, if you teach yourself, for example, how to do a really good jab, cross, right hook, or an excellent step kick, or a superb roundhouse, or whatever it's going to be, that's fine. But if you get angry when you're provoked and you're in the fight and you become tense, then it's going to change the configuration of your muscles as you try and deliver that well-practiced kick, and you're going to kick short, or you're going to get the timing wrong, or you're going to do something else. And if you don't practice controlling yourself first, controlling your nervous system and conditioning your muscles, not just the bones and the muscles in terms of raw strength and impact, you know, smacking trees and things like that, then you set yourself up for injury by misadventure, like by misapplication, basically. So the idea in Systema is that you learn to wrestle, sure, you learn to strike, you learn to fight with weapons, but all of that, it should only be like the icing on a cake of psychological and physical conditioning. So the stuff that looks like massage and breathing and stuff is core conditioning, just to make your body solid enough to be able to perform under pressure. And you can just do that conditioning, and then that's just good for your health anyway. You don't need to learn to fight necessarily. You can do all that stuff and it will just make you very robust and healthy. Or you can take that and then take this new body and mind, and you can do things with it. So that's the relationship really, is like one forms the foundation for the other. You can learn the relaxation, the strength, the conditioning, the physical and psychological conditioning and health aspects of Systema without the martial arts. You can learn it to an extent that way, but you can't learn the martial art without the conditioning that underpins it, if that makes sense. They're interrelated.
Yeah, as I always say to my own students now, the breathing's the most important. I said, as you say, you can do a jab, cross, hook, but how many times can you do it under pressure before you're gassed out?
Yeah. So, I mean, even to the very simple aspect there of like, exactly, like breathing not enough in terms to fuel the intensity of action that you're doing. So that's the very basic level of breathing. It's just breathing sufficiently for the level of the speed that you're running, or the speed that you're moving, or the combinations that you're throwing. If you don't breathe while you're doing that, you're going to get gassed very, very quickly. And an experienced fighter will learn to breathe properly and longer and smoother. But there's levels way beyond that in which you can use breathing to pressurize parts of the body so that it's much easier to distribute impact, so that you don't have to tense your stomach muscles, for example, when you get punched, which can be very helpful because you don't always see the punch coming, right? It's quite easy to brace against the punch that you see. You just shell up the stomach muscles and bam. But if you don't see it, that's the one that wins you, gets you in the liver, something like that. And Systema practitioners work to keep their bodies what we call full, which is the pressure in the body is evenly distributed. When you breathe in, if you think about it, you're literally adding volume to your body, right? You put gas into your lungs, and that volume pushes against all the liquids in your body, and it kind of presses them against your skin and your muscles and your fascia. So there's a pressure there, and the liquids are kind of incompressible. They just push outwards, and the air itself is creating kind of a form of like hydrostatic pressure, almost like a Michelin Man armor around yourself, like that way. If you keep yourself very, very tight and contracted, and there's not much space to expand in there, then you can be very strong. You can maybe withstand impact to a point to the muscles, but you'll get bruised easily, and you'll get winded easily because there's not a lot of pressure in there to withstand the impact right underneath. But if you can keep yourself pressurized and strong, like you still want to make your muscles strong, you still want to have that capacity. But if you can learn to use your breathing to keep everything equally pressurized, then when people punch you in the stomach, that pressure just goes to your arms and to your legs. It just goes, and then nothing happens. You don't get winded, and you get that, that legendary Russian thing of you unload on the guy 50 times, like, is that the best you can do, right? And he hits you back. It's like, that's where it comes from, this resilience. It's the ability to spread out impact and not really feel impacts in the same way that most do, right? It's a bit of a different concept. And then as you get into it, we also look at breathing as the messenger between what your cognitive brain wants to do, like if you have a strategy or an idea that you want to apply, and what your body, which typically reacts via the limbic system of fear and worried about getting pressured and damaged and constricted. It's the messenger that allows you to take your thoughts and push them into the body, even when the body's scared or angry or aggressive, so that you can kind of even things out and you're not as adrenalized, so that you can think more under pressure. You can be more tactical and less reactive, like when you breathe properly or you breathe on purpose in order to initiate motions. There's layers of depth to it that even after 14 years, I've only just begun to mine, right? You think you know it all, and then 2 years later, somebody shows you something different, and you're like, that's amazing. Yeah, it's incredible.
Martial arts seem to have that now. Every time you think you've reached a certain point, you realize you're only beginning again. It's unbelievable. You mentioned weapons earlier. What kind of weapons would be involved in Systema training?
The most common ones we work with are stick. You just work with any length of stick from like 2 foot, like little cudgel, to a 3 foot to a 4 foot. Not typically like the big bow staff type things you see in classical karate and wushu and stuff like that. Just a bat or a stick, something that you would pick up, board with a nail through it, like anything like that. Knife, we do a lot of work with knife, and typically we'll start with a hard, either just a metal blade that's blunted, so you just kind of grind the edge off it so that it's not quite as painful, but it still hurts when it stabs you, right? That's the idea. Or sometimes they'll use one with like a steel core but with a hard plastic edge around it, which also hurts. And then we'll graduate up to using live sharp blades and working with those as well. We never use the bendy rubber ones. We think of those as practically useless. So we'll work with knife and stick quite a lot. We also work with chain. So we'll do work with some flexible weapons. And again, it's not anything flashy. It's not a classical weapon. It's just like if you had to use your belt, for example, you could use your belt with a buckle on the end of it to work that way. And then we have what we call improvised weapons, which is anything and anything. It could be keys. It could be a credit card. It could be a rolled up newspaper, Jason Bourne style, all that kind of stuff. So it can be anything and everything. And we also look at the environment as an improvised weapon. So we'll think about walls, right? I'm sitting here with a stucco wall behind me, and I'll be thinking about how to slam people against that and grind them against it. And the floor itself, I mean, judoka use the floor as well to slam them into, stuff like that. So we fight in around cars, vehicles, things. So everything becomes an improvised weapon after a while, but clothing as well, how you can use clothing against people. But the basic ones we work with are mostly sticks, bladed weapons, just a knife. And then we do, depending on the school, there's more or less work with firearms. Some are really gung-ho about it, and especially in the States, there's just a wider prevalence of gun firearms and people are more into it. So we'll do a lot of work with gun disarms and dry firing and, maybe airsoft, something that's not going to kill you if you get shot. Some Systema schools go a little bit more hardcore militaristic, and they practice with live weapons and machine guns and things like that. But that's, to be honest, that's never really been my bag. I don't know whether it's because I'm from the UK and I'm not a massive gun fan. I'd rather stick away from them. But I know how to disarm. I know how to fire guns and stuff like that. But I don't play with the live fire stuff too much.
Yeah, that's it, mate. And you said earlier too that you've actually went through karate, aikido. Have you incorporated these past martial arts into your current system?
I wouldn't say incorporated as much as that your past training never really disappears. It kind of, there's residues of it. There's probably less karate, both because I didn't study karate in my mind for that long. It wasn't 10 years or anything like that. It was just, and I was kind of a kid. I was just enjoying it, going through the motions. So I don't think I got deep enough into karate. If I'd studied it up to, Nidan level or something, then probably there would be a lot more resonant karate in my system. But Aikido, certainly it works its way out in my movements. In the beginning, I had to actually work hard not to try and superimpose my previous training, because Systema is actually more about taking things away and reacting spontaneously to what's going on, rather than if he does this, then you apply this technique. You start from the worst case scenario, so you start from getting punched in the face or stabbed, and then you see how your body reacts, like out of fear, and then you try and weaponize that, and you turn it into a throw, a lock, a strike, whatever it's going to be. And then later there will be some repeating patterns of things that look like techniques, but the idea is that you create as you go, so everything becomes spontaneous and you don't really rehearse patterns of techniques again and again and again. But because I spent 14 years and a lot of time drilling in Japan, specific arm locks, wrist locks, things like that, if something falls into my lap, then my body will just do it, right? So if somebody has an arm, then it becomes a wrist lock, or I'm going to do. And that's just kind of in my hands. And you'll see that as well. A lot of Systema practitioners come from other styles. I would say more practitioners than not usually come when they're about late 20s, 30s, and after they've studied kickboxing, JiuJitsu, karate, something else, and then they become interested in Systema as a different operating system. It's a different way of applying the skills they already have. So that's the nice thing about it, is you don't have to throw away everything. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you have karate skills, you have kickboxing skills, MMA skills, you can keep them. You just get to apply them with a different mindset and a different pattern of timing, which is nice. It means you haven't wasted your time training. So
yeah, I found that myself now. It was I boxed when I was younger, and then I went into Japanese jiu-jitsu. But it was actually one of the other instructors pointed out to me one night that every time I'm sparring, my legs just disappears. It's just straight on the boxing. And I actually done, I think it was 6 rounds one night, didn't do a single throw, kick, just punching the whole time. Didn't realize it was so incorporated into what I've done before. That it was my go-to. But it's great to have that now. And what advice would you give someone looking to get into Systema and start training?
Find a good instructor. It's like anything else. There's good karate clubs, bad boxing clubs, good boxing clubs, bad karate clubs. So you want to make sure that you find an instructor that knows what they're doing. Typically, I mean, there's only a couple of accredited systems really in Systema. There's the Vasiliev line that I come from, and there's the Kudoshnikov line, pretty much. Most of the others aren't really, they're either in their infancy and they're people who are just trained a bit of Systema and then made their own styles. This happens in every martial art. You get splitters who make their own thing. Or they're so obscure at the moment that it's not clear that the people that are teaching are all that great at teaching, right? They can do it, but they're not particularly good at passing it on, and that kind of stuff. So I can vouch for the systems that I've trained in. And if I would say, just, let the proof be in the pudding, go to a class, see what the tone is like, see what the atmosphere is like. If it's a good Systema class, what you should find is that everybody is friendly, and I mean friendly. Not just not looking to kick your head in and kill you, but they want to help you get stronger. They want to help you improve. And we have this, there's no belts and no gradings, which means that everybody mixes in, and people have been training for 20, 30 years mix in with beginners, and they're happy to do that. They're not like, oh, I've got to work with a beginner. They're actually really overjoyed, because it's like working with a new piece of clay, and, and they have to explain themselves better. They have to demonstrate better. They have to be more concise. So we love working with everybody. And if you find a club that's doing that, it's probably a good and legit Systema club. If you find one where somebody's trying to show off, and the most important thing seems to be how skilled the instructor is, and he's showing off, then probably give it a wide berth, because they're not going to teach you the things that you need to know. So it's an interesting thing. You can kind of go with your gut a little bit. And most people that I run a podcast about Systema, as you may know. And when I talk to people and ask them this question, how did you get started? What was your first experience? Almost all of them have the same set of observations. So I couldn't believe how friendly everybody was. I trained like hardcore, Goju Ryu for years, and everybody was trying to kill me, and somebody snapped my wrist once and stuff like that. And then it's not that we don't get injured and we don't punch each other in the face, and we train really hard, but we're happy about it. There's smiles on everybody's faces while you're punching each other, and there's smiles when you're choking somebody out and stuff like that. It's the philosophy is that if you're always really, really intense, if you keep yourself at like 80% tension all the time, then when a real situation kicks off, you've almost got nowhere to go. You always get those guys that tell me, oh, you don't know me. If I'm in a real fight, I get that red mist. You don't even know what I'm like. It's like, no, I pretty much know what you like. It's rubbish. It's if all you practice is this, then you've got nowhere to go. If you practice violence and things that bring you fear and impact and all those kinds of things in a state of mind where you feel relaxed, then you become comfortable with it. And then when you're in a fight, you can kind of float and you can feel comfortable. And if you have to step it up, if a knife comes out or a firearm, you've got somewhere to go, right? Then you can really, really go serious. But if you're all the time like this, you've got no energy to go anywhere else, So it's So
perfect. And I know with COVID now at the minute, and a lot of places have been closed down, clubs, gyms. And do you think technology has played a big role over the last while? And do you think it's something we could use in the future to kind of keep training and to supplement person-to-person training?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's had to be out of necessity, right? It's like what other path have we had? We haven't been able to put hands on each other and stuff. I mean, in North Carolina, we've been fairly fortunate in that the local governor handled it well, even though the president didn't at all. The local government just took their own decisions and decided to shut things down and help things out. And so they've done better than most. And so we've enjoyed long periods of like months at a time where we've been able to meet in small numbers, like groups of 5 or 6 with masks, and you keep the same partner and you don't switch out. And we've done that without any instances of COVID, for months and months. But then sometimes, as the situation comes up, you get shut down. And we've had online classes all the way from February. So we've kind of been doing like a 50-50 where we have a couple of classes a week live with a very small number of people, and then most people training online. But initially it was like, oh man, we have to do this. How are we going to make this work? There's only so many times you can shadow box and show these movements and things. But with Systema, it's actually made us realize that about 90% of the training is individual anyway. Like those foundations we talked about at the beginning are 90% of your training. Like the 10% of wrestling and punching and hitting other people is where you get to apply what you spend all of that time developing on your own. And there's no reason why you can't do that self-development on your own, really. And especially if you get creative with tools, you can walk up and down the wall with your fist. You can put a stick behind your neck while you get up and down from the ground. We've even had one of our instructors had like a pillowcase with a bean can in it, right? And you swing the pillowcase and hit yourself with it so that you can practice taking impacts. It's like people got really creative about how to make up for the other things. So it's been kind of fun. And I think actually we're realizing now that there's a lot that can be done. And if you, even when and if we get to go back to live training again, we're probably going to keep these ancillary online classes because there's a lot that you can get out of them. And there's also people that, what's been really interesting, some people can't make it because of the commute or the drive, or they've got kids, or, you know, it's something else is stopping them from actually showing up. And when you're online, you can flick it on in your house. It's like, yeah, there's no excuse, you know, it's not that, you know, it's a lot easier to be consistent. You just have to be self-motivated, and that's the problem. I think there's definitely there's a benefit to doing any exercise, martial arts included, in a group, because you have like accountability buddies, right? Your mate Dave is showing up, so you feel like you should show up or you'll let him down, and you become part of a community, and that's really important in Systema. So we've been very careful to keep that going. We've had like online pub quiz nights on a Friday, for example, or, you know, meetups, like even if they're online, so that we can keep that sense of community again. And you need that physical proximity and that closeness, and so you have to assimilate that somehow. If you can't meet in person, you have to find some way of staying as a group, in addition to the one-to-one stuff. So yeah, I think there's a balance to be struck, and we'll probably learn more about how to do that. But one good thing is that we've been forced to do it, right? Whereas most of us didn't even know what Zoom was a year and a half ago. Now everybody's a Zoom expert, you know what I mean? That's
it. I thought it was great. Now, because we were forced into it, we were kind of, everybody had to do it. But even going through YouTube now, some of the creativity from instructors is unbelievable. It's difficult to actually believe, and because technology was looked down on for so long, you can't learn martial arts through. But it's unbelievable amount of creativity I've seen. Have you seen judo instructors using belts around a door handle to teach throws?
Sure.
It was unbelievable. But where can people find you online and follow along?
Yeah, so easiest place is just ncsystema.com, so NC for North Carolina, and there you can find our online classes. If you actually go to ncsystema.com/online, that will take you directly, and then you can train with us. We train about 4 or 5 times a week online, and they're usually hour-long classes, and it's only about the equivalent of 30 quid a month or something like that. So it's pretty cheap at the moment. We're trying to keep it really cheap for everybody so that they can, you know, a lot of people are having a hard time under COVID with jobs and stuff. So we've been trying to keep it on the down on that one. So you can find out about that there. And then there's also links to my instructor's site. And if you're interested in finding out about Systema generally, I would recommend RussianMartialArt.com, all one word, RussianMartialArt.com. That's Vladimir Vasilyev's site, and has some information about Systema history. It has links to his whole video training. He's got like probably about 80 downloadable videos of about 2 hours long each, instructional on everything from fighting in the water to fighting in cars to, you know, bladed knife work, all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested in learning from the master, then go straight to the source and get some of his work there. So.
Excellent. I'll put all the links in the description for those too.
Grand.
And finally, something I just like to ask every guest to get on here is I know you said you've tried karate when you were younger.
Yeah.
And the Cobra Kai series on TV has got quite big recently.
Yeah.
And would you be Aikido or Cobra Kai camp?
That's a tough one, isn't it? It really is. I mean, obviously Cobra Kai are cooler. I mean, there's no denying that. They've definitely got the cool factor and better uniforms. They've definitely got better uniforms. But since everything I've said about the moral code is in there and stuff like that, I mean, right now under John Kreese, I'd have to give it a wide berth. I'd have to go with the Karate Kid camp, I'm afraid, just out of the moral character. But you know, it's touch and go.
Unbelievable. I've stuck with Cobra Kai the whole time, and I'm 35 interviews into doing this podcast, and I've had one person actually joined in the Cobra Kai side, so I might have to switch soon.
Yeah.
Well, nice. It was a pleasure having you on, Glenn, and thanks for your time and all the best. Hopefully all your gyms will be open again shortly and you can get back training in person.
Yeah, likewise, mate. Yeah, lovely meeting you. And, all the best to you and yours.
Yeah, and happy Christmas.
Yeah, same to you.
Thank you, Nick.
Cheers.
Right.